Okay, good morning everyone. I already introduced myself, but I'm Alex Taylor. And this presentation is going to be about the ArcaMapper LAN client, specifically the new version which was shipped with ArcaOS 5.1. And I know quite a number of people have noticed that it works a bit differently in 5.1 than it did in 5.0. I think it works better because I wrote it, but maybe I'm slightly prejudiced there. So, what is ArcaMapper? The name ArcaMapper, it's actually an umbrella name for several different components. So, backing up a bit, ArcaMapper is basically a modern, in quotes, OS2 client for network file sharing. Now, LAN clients have been available for OS2 since the early days, of course. And they've been part of the OS distribution since Warp Connect, I think. However, the last iteration of IBM's LAN client, known as the File and Print Client, was last updated over 20 years ago. ArcaOS still includes this as an optional component, but the fact of the matter is that it just doesn't really support modern LAN environments that well. For networks that include current generation Samba or Windows-based systems, or which use Active Directory or Kerberos for user authentication, you really have to have a Samba-based client for OS2. So ArcaMapper is an umbrella term for a bunch of interrelated components, specifically NetDrive, the Samba plugin for NetDrive, NDP-SMB, the Samba libraries and client tools, and the Heimdall Kerberos library, and last but maybe not least, a user interface. Most of those components that I just mentioned have been updated in ArcaOS 5.1, but the most visible change is in the UI, so it gets most of the blame.
I give it credit, I had much better luck with it than the older one. So.
I did something right. Okay. So why a new ArcaMapper UI? Well, there's a few reasons. First of all, in ArcaOS 5.0, the ArcaMapper UI was a rebranded branch of the very old EVFS GUI user interface, which I wrote somewhere around 2008 or something in VxRex. And it was originally a very basic graphical wrapper to various command line Samba tools. And over its many years of life, EVFS GUIs had a lot of additional functionality layered on top of it, to the point where, from my point of view, it was getting very difficult to maintain. I also felt that it was starting to run up against certain limits that were baked into its design. Like I said, it was originally written to be very crude, didn't account for a lot of things. And this wasn't helped by the fact that EVFS GUI was one program that combined logins, connections, and network browsing all in one monolithic interface, one tool. And among other things, this made handling multiple credentials on a LAN awkward, to say the least. The fact also that it relied on calling command line Samba programs was another weakness, since every now and then updated versions of these commands would come out, and new versions could introduce changes in behavior, changes in syntax, and every time that happened, EVFS GUI would kind of break, and I'd have to go in and sort of add some more duct tape and baling wire to keep it working. So I finally had enough of that. So with the new ArcaMapper UI, from a technical perspective, it links directly into the Samba libraries and the Samba API, which is not only more reliable, it's also faster. I think noticeably faster if you use it. More outwardly, obviously, it changes to a modular design wherein logging on, connecting, and browsing are all handled by separate components. And I admit this can take some getting used to, but it's actually much more similar, intentionally so, to the old file and print client user experience, where you had a dialog for logging on, you had a dialog for establishing a connection, you had a separate network browser. So in that sense, it's actually more OS2-like, in my view. And this modular approach also makes ArcaMapper more flexible, both from a technical standpoint and from a user standpoint, and from a legal standpoint as well, since it makes it easier to separate parts which link to differently licensed libraries. So the ArcaMapper UI in 5.1 now consists of 4 main programs, each one dedicated to a specific area of functionality. Authentication, aka logging on or off. Connection, which is mapping drives to remote directories. Browsing, viewing resources which are available on the LAN. And finally, a command line tool that supports connecting and browsing using a syntax more or less compatible with the old IBM net command. While it is part of ArcaOS 5.1, the new ArcaMapper UI can be installed on other systems. It does require the latest, or at least more or less current, klibc and GCC runtime libraries, as many things do. It also requires the Heimdall client and the Samba client libraries. And the Qt4 runtime libraries are also strongly recommended, because most of the GUI programs are written in Qt. However, you can technically use it without having Qt, because there is still a very kind of bare bones version that doesn't require Qt. I do recommend the Qt version though. It looks and feels and works much nicer. The source, the ArcaMapper UI, RPM and SRPM packages that are published on the ArcaNoe REL Yum repository. And if you want the link, talk to Lewis or go to the ArcaNoe website. I'm sure it's on the wiki somewhere.
It's in the wiki,
yeah. And the source code also resides in a publicly readable Subversion repository that's hosted by ArcaNoe. And again, if you want that, go talk to Lewis, because I don't think that one is on the wiki, although it's probably in the README files somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's in the README, but I don't think we have it on the wiki.
Yeah. So what I want to do is see if what I wanted to do was actually demonstrate connecting and browsing LAN shares. Unfortunately, due to the funky way this network environment is set up, I can't actually talk to my home LAN servers from within my VM.
I can switch, if you hook up to here, I can start the Samba server here.
You know, I have a NAS running right here that's on the Wi-Fi network in the hotel, I guess.
Oh, that'd be cool.
You can try it and see if you can find it.
Yeah, all right. Once we get to the, if you could give me a hand with that once we get to the connecting portion, sure. But first of all, I just want to start out by showing the folder which contains the ArcaMapper stuff. So it's under network, and whereas before you had a single program icon, which I think was also called ArcaMapper Network Connections, now you have a folder. And that is basically what it looks like. I draw your attention to the very helpful help, the ArcaMapper guide, which I know everybody always reads before they have any, when they have any problems or before opening a support request. Ooh, that's yeah. Let me do something about that. There we go. So it gives you a quick overview. It gives you a quick start cheat sheet, sort of. And then it talks about the individual programs, screenshots and everything. Gives you the net command summary, and even gives you some basic troubleshooting tips. So I encourage you to consult this when you're getting into using this. Alright, so the first component that I want to talk about is the credential manager. In a traditional LAN environment, users normally log on once and then they can access any LAN resources that they're authorized for. In multi-user operating systems, this process is typically integrated with logging on to the actual OS. However, OS 2 is not a multi-user operating system, so the whole authentication process needs to be handled separately. ArcaMapper is based on the NetDrive Samba plugin, which authenticates each resource whenever you mount it. Since OS 2 has no standard way to remember credentials once they've been entered, NDP SMB by itself requires the user ID and password to be typed in every time you want to mount a remote directory. EVFS GUI was able to kind of save one user ID and password in memory. That didn't work that well if you had to use more than one set of credentials. So the credential manager was designed to solve this dilemma in a reasonably secure manner. So first, it provides a replacement logon dialog, which supports both NTLM and Kerberos forms of authentication. And if you don't really know what that means, don't worry about it. NTLM is basically the one everybody uses. Kerberos, if you need to use Kerberos, you will probably know you need to use Kerberos. So don't worry too much about that. For Kerberos authentication, what this tech does behind the scenes is it actually requests what's called a ticket granting ticket from the authentication server and saves that to a file cache. For NTLM authentication, which is the more common type, it saves the user, password, and domain name in a location in shared memory on the OS. And from there, the connection manager and the network browser and the net command can all go to retrieve the credentials whenever they need them. This is, I called it as secure as reasonably possible. The credentials are not stored to disk, which means they only last until you reboot. And I did that because, my background is kind of enterprise environments where you design for security right from the start. So I tend to think in a secure by default way. I know some people aren't too happy with the fact that it doesn't save them between reboots, but there are ways around that, and I'll get to that. It does not encrypt the credentials in memory. That was planned as a feature. It may still be on one of my long-term goals, but I mean, if somebody has access to your shared memory, you probably have bigger security problems anyway. And the one weakness I can think of is if somebody takes like a system dump of your memory, or like a memory dump, and then starts passing that around, it's possible that you could get leaked that way. So if an enterprise customer comes up and says, hey, we want this more secure, okay, we'll take a look at that. But for now, it is what it is. As I say, it's as secure as it can reasonably be. So besides saving the credentials, there's another mode in the credential manager which provides a view. I don't know if you can really make out the screenshots here, but I'll show you on the VM in a minute. It provides a view of currently active credentials from which you can log off, so to speak, by simply deleting the saved credentials from memory, or in the case of Kerberos credentials, deleting the file cache. Or again, in the case of Kerberos, you can actually renew the credentials if their active period has expired, but their renewal period has not. So let's take a quick look at the credential manager here. This surface is really not great for optical mice, is it? So there's a few different icons that call out the credential manager. Log on new credentials is the main one. And yeah, that's what I get for mucking around with the resolution. So I actually have one that's active already. Oh, and yes, I was testing this the other day. I created a Kerberos credential, or I logged on to a Kerberos domain on one of my VMs, and you can see it shows up here. It was valid until November 30th, that's why it's in red. I could renew it, except it won't work because I'm not actually on my LAN at the moment. I can just remove it, or if I don't need that, I can just log on some other way. So I will say log on as Alex, password, something, I don't know, make something up. What's important to note is that it doesn't actually verify the credentials when you add them. It just saves them it only verifies them when you try to use them to connect to something. So you can put in anything really. Domain, this is a bit misleading. The string here is pretty much arbitrary. Generally, it's just well, okay, for Kerberos, it's not arbitrary. It would be whatever your Kerberos realm is. But as you can see, it's reading my KRB configuration file to get that. And from here, it's reading my Samba configuration file to get the default domain. But normally what I recommend putting in here is the name of whatever entity is responsible for owning that user ID. So if you have a domain server which maintains the users, I would put the name of the domain. If it's just an individual peer workstation or server, I would put the name of that server. So for example, on my home LAN, I have a NAS, which I do most of my network-based stuff on. Oops. And typing one-handed while not looking at the screen is a recipe for success. Okay, so Alex on disk station, I log on, boom. It's very quick because, like I said, it's simply just saving them to memory. Active credentials, that's just a slightly more sophisticated version of what that active dropdown showed. So now I have 2 credentials that are currently logged on. Notice that the NTLM type is valid until shutdown, but NTLM credentials will always show valid until shutdown. Technically, they're valid until the credential daemon terminates, but since it loads at startup, I mean, you can kill it manually if you like, but shutdown is when it will effectively end. And Kerberos will be a Kerberos ticket will be valid until however your Kerberos environment is set up. So you notice I can renew a Kerberos ticket. I can't renew an NTLM ticket because renewal is kind of a Kerberos specific concept. I could also add another set here if I want. Add another set here if I wanted to. I think I'm probably good right now. So that's basically what the credential manager looks like. If I want to log off, I would just log off by saying remove here. I say remove rather than log off because, well, that's really all you're doing is removing the credentials from memory. I've gone back and forth a few times on some of the syntax here, so I'm basically just listening to users' reports. If they find something confusing, I'll generally change them. So that's the credential manager. And come back to, where are we? Okay. So the next portion is called the connection manager, and you can think of this as a graphical version of the old command line netuse, and it does just what you would think. It connects a remote folder to a local drive or directory, and on the dialog here you have the option of selecting either an existing credential that's already in memory, or you can create a new credential, which is the option that's new logon under authentication. Again, the screenshot's tiny here. I'll show you in a slightly bigger format in a minute. So you can mount to either a drive or a directory. The basic dialog here is deliberately quite simple. It provides fields for the share name and the mount point. The credentials are offered in a drop-down list. As I just mentioned, you can mount the remote share directly to a drive letter, or you can mount to a subdirectory, as long as that's a NetDrive virtual drive. And that means that you don't have to use up a drive letter for every shared resource like you did in the old file and print client, which is quite handy, especially if you have a lot of shares and not all that many drive letters to spare. So for each connection, you can also specify options which will be passed to the NDP SMB plugin. It's the NetDrive Samba plugin for those who are keeping score. The plugin offers a few options like NTLM level, encryption support, extended attribute support, cache settings, and whether or not to make the connection read-only. And finally, there's a checkbox under the options panel, which I'll show you in a moment, which lets you automatically save the connection. So let's take a look at that. So we would go to new connection. I hope everybody can see that okay.
Mhm.
Yes, the wonders of running in a VM. Yay! Let's see if I can do something like that. There we go. So, by the way, I just released an updated version of the ArcaMapper UI a few days ago. Actually, I updated it yesterday morning, so take a look at that.
Okay.
Because I found a bug. But anyway, the current version is 1.0.3.1 release 1. And the bug was actually in the message file, so, but it
Okay.
caused a crash, so it was
Ooh.
kind of a major bug.
Okay.
Anyway, the new version finally will actually automatically pre-select the first active credential that it finds. Previous versions would just always leave the default to new login, which confused some people who weren't like noting what this was actually doing. So people were like, why do I have to log on every time well, you don't. You're just supposed to select your existing credentials. But I realized it should be automatically selecting an existing credential, so it does that now. So I've got my credentials, my share name, and I'm going to go through the slides, and then maybe we can try to do this. So I won't play around too much with this now. The options panel expands out there, and you can see these are various options. These are the normal defaults, I think.
Can you explain those first two? Like I always have to uncheck the first one and check the second one to get it to work.
It depends what your server or NAS or whatever supports. I mean,
And how do you find out?
trial and error, basically.
Yeah.
Well, it has to do with like the version of the authentication protocol and the SMB wire protocol that supports. That might be in the documentation somewhere. I think this is kind of off the top of my head. I haven't read the details recently, but I think these two options here are specific to the authentication protocol, not the wire protocol. So
The SMB1, that's the thing that...
that's a wire protocol.
Yeah.
So that's controlled by your Samba config settings, and I'll mention that in the troubleshooting section. Generally speaking, if it's old, you're probably going to have to turn off encryption. My old, 12-year-old NAS doesn't support encryption for the logon, so I always have to turn that off. Most NASs or servers you're likely to encounter these days probably don't require NTLM version 1 encryption. Even my ancient NAS doesn't need that, but there might be some which do, so again, see what works for you. Enable extended attributes if available. This requires that the file system on the server actually supports extended attributes. I generally leave this off unless I know for sure that it's going to work. Honestly, I tend to have more trouble with extended attributes enabled than without on a LAN drive. These, I would not recommend messing with them too much. Mount read only, it's what it says on the tin. And save this connection. That is kind of a special thing, so I will switch back to the slides for a second here. Because I want to cover that briefly. Okay, so the next part of the connection manager is the manage connection screen, where you get a list of active connections. Then you have a bunch of options where you can.
Mine's dead again.
Oh yeah.
Is it still running better?
No, it's okay. So yeah, so the management mode shows all your currently active connections on the first tab here, and from here you can connect. You can disconnect a connection, or you can save a connection. You can also create a new connection, either by opening the connection dialog, that's what the new button does, or you can actually import a NetDrive NDC file, which is what the import button does. And the second tab, which I'll show you in a moment, shows your saved connections, and from there you can restore them individually or delete them. And so, talking about saved connections a bit, I don't want to kind of flip back and forth too much here. So I'll just give you a brief description. When you choose to save a connection, either from the options panel of the connection dialog or from the manager here. You have the option of either saving it as a restorable saved connection or exporting it to an NDC file. Again, that's the NetDrive format file. Technically, the saved connections, the restorable connections, are also NDC files, but they're just saved in a special directory, which the connection manager scans on startup. Before I show you that, just quickly mention that there is now a preferences dialog as well. That allows you to set your preferred startup behavior, as well as certain options around connecting and disconnecting. So let's go back here. We really need like 3 screens for this one. There we go. So saving connection, actually, I doubt I'm going to be able to demonstrate this because you can't save a connection until you've actually connected to it. So I'll save that for if we can actually get this working. The preferences. So restore saved connections on startup. Any connection that you've saved as a restorable connection will automatically get restored on startup. If they require, well, they do require credentials, but you will be prompted the first time it tries to mount one of these saved connections, it checks what credentials it requires and it prompts you for the password. You only have to enter them once, so if I have like 3 or 4 different connections that I'm trying to mount that all use the same user ID and log on, I only have to enter the password once. It'll get saved to the cache and it'll be remembered from then on. You can also choose whether or not to actually disconnect share when you log off. This sounds a little counterintuitive, but technically there's no requirement to disconnect a share that once you've attached it, even if you've removed your credentials from the system, because it only uses them when you first mount them. But people quite definitely said that it's really weird to be able to log off but still have access to your shares. So I think we turn this on by default now. Generally speaking, you probably want most of these enabled. Remember last use connection options. So when you're logging on, when you're connecting, it will remember the stuff you selected here, if you have that checked. And remember last 10 connections. So think, if you have, this is a fresh VM install, but if I had previously logged on to like attached connections here, you'd actually see a drop down. This field would be a drop down, and you'd see like the last 10 share names that you connected to, or the last whatever that you have this set to, assuming you have this option enabled. So just a few little quality of life features there. So I'm going to jump back to the slideshow again. This switching back and forth. Sorry about that, but I want to talk about the network browser now. This is probably the most finicky of all of the items in this user interface. So browsing the LAN, it's always been a bit hit and miss in any environment. One thing, not all servers will advertise their presence on a network. Also, some networks may be configured to prevent browsing. And even if a server announces its presence, it might not be willing to say what resources it has available. Or it might only be willing to say if you're logged on with a valid ID, or even then it might actually have some resources which are hidden and some which aren't, which won't show up in the browser. So as I say, it's a bit hit and miss sometimes, but it's an important function that I think users expect. So ArcaMapper provides one. Network browser is pretty simple in concept. It shows a list of workgroups and servers that can be seen on the network, and a list of shares on the currently selected server. Because not all servers advertise their presence on the network, you can also explicitly add servers to the network view by putting their host names into a special text file, which has the name nb hosts and is located in your etc directory, usually nptn etc by default. So again, whether the shares on any given server are visible depends on the configuration of the server and on the credentials that you use for browsing. So yeah, credentials for browsing. By default, the network browser uses the standard guest credentials, that is to say username guest, but you can switch to a different set of credentials if you need to. And once you can actually see the shares that you want, you can mount one by double-clicking on it, and that'll open the connection dialog. much point in me trying to show you the browser without a network, so I'll just go on for now. Finally, we have the net command, and the net command is intentionally similar to IBM's net command that was part of the file and print client and LAN requester and all of the previous generations going way back into the dawn of time, like around 1986 or whatever that was. So it supports a subset of the same syntax with some modifications to allow for new and changed features. It provides access to most of the ArcaMapper UI features without the graphical user interface, with the exception of logging on or off. So, if you chose not to install the Qt-based graphical programs, you can still use the net command from the command line to access ArcaMapper's features. And for authentication, there is a stripped-down version of the credential manager, which is written purely in the PM widget set. So it doesn't use Qt, and you can use it in that case, but it's a lot more primitive, and I don't recommend using it if you do have Qt installed. I will quickly show you that. This is kind of a hidden feature if you are looking at a fully installed version with all the Qt apps. The icon for this guy is not actually created if you did install Qt versions, but it's called PM Cred, and it is always installed as part of the basic web UI. So this is basically just a PM version of the credential manager if you don't happen to like the Qt version. And it's a lot more primitive, as you can see, but it's essentially the same sort of functionality. You don't, actually no, you do get some of the, you don't get as many of the advanced options offered because honestly it's kind of a pain to write all this stuff in Presentation Manager. But, I mean, most people don't need all the advanced options anyway. And if you do, well, you can always install the Qt version, or you can use KInit, which is a command line program as well, which lets you do the same thing with Kerberos. So that's the ugly version of the Credential Manager. And I will finish up my slides. We've got about 15, 20 minutes left, so hopefully we'll have time to do some actual demonstration.
If you install the IBM, the older file and whatever it's called, the client, this guy comes up before that in the path. Is that right?
No. If I believe we arranged it so that if you install the IBM file and print client, I think the IBM's version of the net command is put first in the path.
Okay. So you have to go find this. Where is this? Where's the net command?
I think it's in USR bin.
Okay.
Well, yeah, actually, no, that's a good point. In ArcaOS 5.0, I put it in the NetDrive programs.
Actually, let me try it.
I put it in the NetDrive directory, and in that case, yes, the IBM file and print client version would come first.
Yeah, that's what happens.
The new version, or the updated version, installs via RPM, so it goes into the USR bin directory. In that case, it might still come up before the IBM version. So I should probably verify. I think we did look at that at one point, but I don't remember exactly.
I got the IBM one when I just typed net.
Are you using 5.1?
Yes.
Okay, I guess we did our job.
That answers the question.
Via an upgrade, if that matters.
It might. Type which net. What do you get?
Okay. User bin.
Okay.
Net.cmd.
Ah, that's right. We added a Rex wrapper, didn't we?
Yeah.
It checks to see if the file and print client is installed and
Right,
calls that one. I
right.
remember. Yeah, we went through
Yeah.
that whole thing. Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting old. My memory's not.
So that
It's like an
directs
addict,
the
you know?
IBM one if it's there.
It will find the IBM one,
Okay,
yes,
got
if
it.
it's there. Yeah. I knew we were smart.
And of course, we had the custom one that we did for our client
Yeah.
first, and that one behaves differently than the others. And
It does, but actually,
There are three
the
of
net command that we have was kind of a descendant of that.
right,
There's three net.exes.
right,
There's
because
one
the
net.
Samba client comes with a net exe, which is completely different than any other net.
It's a different syntax, not compatible, but
Completely different.
Samba needs it or expects it, or people who install Samba kind of expect it. So.
Yes.
So it's in programs NDFS.
Okay, no, that one, that's actually an upgrade artifact. In fact,
We should remove that.
my commit the other day did that.
Ah,
You notice it updated all the NDFS.zip
yes,
files?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
We had it in the NDFS.zip file. That's why.
Yeah.
So yeah, in 5.0,
That's right.
that should have been removed. It wasn't in 5.1.0. In
Right.
5.1.1, that will get taken away. Ignore it. You can delete it. It should not be used anymore. The one in the NDFS programs directory.
All right, so I have three. The one in IBM LAN NetProg,
That's the IBM
the
one.
one you just talked about.
Yeah.
And then there's a third one in Live Exec Samba under user.
That's the Samba one.
That's something.
So I don't have the one that you're talking about then.
Okay, I thought you
Right.
I thought you said you had one in programs NDFS.
Yeah, is that the one that you provide?
We provided
It's an
that-
old version of the one that we
old one.
provided.
That
It's
one came in
obsolete.
5.0.
It should have been deleted during the upgrade. It wasn't. We fixed that for the next
So where's
refresh.
the one that should be provided?
USR bin.
It's not there.
Well, the command file's there. And the
Oh,
command
CMD.
file will point to user live exec. Correct?
No.
Are you
Oh.
sure?
That's right. Sorry.
Is
The executables are actually called net_s and net_nd.
Oh, that's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, because one of them links to the NetDrive libraries and therefore has to use one particular, it has to use like the BSD license or something.
Right.
The other links to the Samba libraries and has to use the GPL, so they have to be separate programs.
Yeah,
It's a legal thing.
I found them.
Yeah.
I found some other stuff too.
We provide you lots of entertainment. Endless opportunities for exploration. Okay, so a few quick troubleshooting tips. Most of these are in the help file. Some of them aren't, but I kind of consider them fairly obvious. Like the first one here, if you're trying to connect to a server and it's not connecting, make sure you can actually see the server on the network. Ping it, whatever. Also, make sure if you're using it by host name, make sure that the host name can actually be resolved. So try pinging it by host name too. If you have to put it into your hosts file, do that. If you're running a home LAN, it's entirely possible that you don't have a local DNS server, so you may need to put this in your host file. Also check your TCP/IP routing and broadcast settings. I've run into issues with that sometimes. Then there's the smb.conf file. This is located in your etc directory under the subdirectory Samba. It's called smb.conf. It basically configures how the Samba client stuff behaves. We do provide a generic one on a fresh install. If you didn't upgrade, you might need to tweak it because some of the internal defaults of Samba changed between the older versions that we had in 5.0 and the newer versions now. For example, they use by default a much more secure, or that is to say recent, minimum protocol. So a lot of people after upgrading have complained that, well, we can't connect to our servers anymore because they're like running OS2 file and print client or something. It's because they are running they're running an older version of the LAN protocol that the default Samba libraries don't look for by default. So you may need to add that client min protocol equals nt1 to your smb.conf. We are still going back and forth about how we're supposed to handle this during an upgrade. Like philosophically, we don't like to change your configuration files during an upgrade because you theoretically have things configured as you like. But in this case, if the actual defaults have changed, maybe it's something, it's an ongoing discussion. But yeah, these might need to be adjusted in your smb.conf file. Also, make sure your user ID has the right permissions on the server that you're trying to connect to. If you're not allowed to access a certain share, it's not going to mount it. And finally, I touched on this before, try different settings when you're connecting for NTLM1 or not, enable encryption or not. Sometimes it's just a matter of trial and error. So, we can take questions. I want to see if we can do that. Where is he? Well, I want to see if we can set up connection to that.
Oh, you were looking for David.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh well. We'll start with questions. When he comes back, we can deal with that. Howard.
Okay.
I found that if you log in with an invalid password, it hangs on to that. Won't let you re-log in with the right password.
You have to destroy the credential and put it in. Yeah. that is kind of annoying. I fat fingered a password or two in my time. I do want to have an option to like edit a credential, so you can fix something like that. It's kind of a low priority because, well, I mean, it's not that hard to just delete the credential and then re-edit, but yeah, I admit it would be kind of nice if you could just go in and fix the password.
You tend to go around you can't log in, oh darn, I forgot that, delete it, and then go back in.
Yeah.
You keep going around that loop.
Yeah. So, is an issue. Yeah, Neil?
Did you want to try, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, in a second.
I try to keep this short. It's not really the subject of your presentation, but the Samba distributed with ArcaOS.
The server?
The server. I'm not really clear on how to manage the users. for that.
Unfortunately, I really know nothing about the Samba server. I've never used it.
Okay.
Really, so
Yeah.
I do know. Well, I've looked briefly at the configuration and stuff. I'm not a particular fan of the configuration program that's provided. It's not ArcaNoa work.
No. Yeah.
But yeah, it's. I think Lewis has done a little more with it than I have. Probably not by a great deal.
Not by a great deal. The actual hold up with us releasing the Samba 4 server with ArcaOS is the debate about replacing the GUI tools
Yeah.
for user management and share management.
Yeah. Apparently, that GUI is not fully compatible with Samba 4. I think.
Right. You know, they did a good job, sort of, but when I hit help, it says to be determined.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not really the approach that we would like to take for managing that stuff, which is why we haven't really looked at
Yeah.
what needs to be done to update that to make it fully compliant with what we want to do. Then the flip side of the argument is most people running a Samba server know how to do this from the command line, so why do they need GUI tools?
Yeah, I think if you just moved up from IBM file and print client, you want to use this because
And that's the offset to that argument.
Yeah, the one-page cheat sheet would really help.
Yeah.
It's just a suggestion, but
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
thanks.
So, Davey, could you?
You want to try pinging QNAP, see if you can see the host first?
Oh well, I wouldn't have that in my host file. Do you have like?
Right.
Do you
You need to have the
DNS set up or
IP
something?
address for QNAP.
Okay, let me, hang on.
Hang on. Do I actually have? I do. Yeah.
Yeah, here, it's, 192
That's not going to route.
168
Mm-hmm.
dot 8.123.
No, because,
It's not going to route.
no, but you have a wireless on that?
On what?
On your router? On your router?
On the router? You mean the little thing I have to
Yeah.
get? Maybe, I don't know.
No,
I think it does have Wi-Fi, but I've never used it.
alright, so the easiest thing to do.
Yeah. You want if you're on a 168.8 subnet, that's not the hotels, is it?
No.
This Wi-Fi router's adding a net layer, that's why it's unreachable.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying if you go to like, I already tested it from the phone over here, so if you connect you connect to this Wi-Fi.
All right. 1 second.
Oh, yeah.
So what's going on?
What's it called?
It's the, this thing, I gotta pull, there's several of them's got the very similar names, so I gotta verify. Alright, so it's the GL, and at the end, it's got 410, where everything else has got,
Okay.
It can be either the 410 or the 410-5G, either one should,
Is that mine or yours?
mine.
Okay.
I don't know what, like I said, I don't know what yours has got.
I think it's a
Do we have a
GLNet
security key?
device.
It's good life. It's just the default right now.
Lowercase? One
Yeah.
word?
Yeah.
Here, I'll turn off my VPN just so it doesn't confuse things. Alright, can you give me an IP address on the LAN? I just want to see if the
Yeah.
host can see it first.
It's 192.168.8 145.
Okay, I can ping it here. Might need to reinitialize the network on this guy, but let's see. Well, no,
Nope, there you go.
Alright, so let's try so this is the net command. Oh yeah, it's gonna try and look for my domain, isn't it? You probably don't have master browsing enabled on that thing, so what's the do you have a server address?
It's a 192.168.8.145.
Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay. Oh, there we go. Very nice, thanks, Ian. Yeah, so this is what the netview command looks like. This noise at the top, other people have seen this. I'm not totally sure what causes it. It comes from deep inside the Samba libraries. I think it's probably something to do with having multiple LAN interfaces, or it might be a VM thing, but it's harmless. If you see, it's just noise. So, if I wanted to use something, is there anything that I can
Warpstock
connect?
23.
Warpstock 23, okay. So, let's go back into the GUI here. First of all, I guess we're going to want credentials, aren't we? And I will remove this guy. I should remove this guy too, just because it's... so, do we have a credential we can use?
So Warpstock, and the password is capital Warpstock 23. Oh, capital W Warpstock, I should say.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Any chance of getting a show option on that?
Yeah, that's probably not a bad idea. So I will call this, I don't know, work group. Okay, so now I'll go to the network browser. Oops. That's because I was last browsing using that NSA 320 ID. So what I need to do is
That I didn't get to work on here.
authenticate. So I need to change the authentication for browsing. I can use a new login, I can use guest, or I can use an existing one. I don't think we used...
It's Samba 4, so.
Yeah. Now, we might not see anything, because again, you don't have a master browser on there, and I don't have a host file configured with that. So what I'm going to do is create, where is my command prompt here? cd mptn mpvc env, that's short for network browser, by the way. Hosts, and I will add 8.1.1.6.8.2.8.1.4.5. Does the server actually have a name, or is it just Warpstock? Or
Well, the PC's got a name. I don't know if the host name is Algorazzo, but I don't know if it's registered anywhere.
I'll just call it Andy. I'm trying to remember if that's the right order. Name comes first or IP address. I mean, I designed the file, I should know, but I don't off the top of my head.
Put them both in.
Yeah. Hang on. By the way, each of the individual programs also has help. Static server list. Oh, sorry, it's just the server name, it's not the... that's, there we go. And just close out. Try this again. Now again, this also might not work if he doesn't have browsing enabled. So, oops. I think this workgroup name, it's coming from my Samba config file, so it just assumes anything which doesn't have its own workgroup is going to be on that. Oh, there we go. So yeah, that ndhosts file tells it, I know this server exists, go check it, basically.
Now, why could you see his and not mine? What's going on there? This is all was opaque.
He's logged into the router that's connected directly to Andy's machine right there.
Okay.
If you-
So they're on the same LAN segment.
But I have a different router.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I could, in theory, connect to yours, but, so, Warpstock, let's try connecting to this one. So, note that it has, populated server string here. I will assign it to, and you're a little low down on the screen, aren't you there, buddy? Drive W, okay, successfully mounted to drive W. So
Just to
let's-
check something, see if you can connect to Q. Yeah,
Alright.
right down here,
Oh, sorry, yeah.
cause it shouldn't be shared, so I just wanna make sure that. I haven't there.
That's where the good stuff is.
Let's show everyone on the
Oh,
internet.
by the way, if you try to enter a mount point that's already in use, it'll tell you, it's already in use. But technically you can, as far as NetDrive is concerned, you can mount more than one thing to the same directory or share. I don't recommend it.
The NetDrive GUI itself will allow you to do that.
Oh. Well, it mounted it. I might not see anything on it. Let's take a look.
Let's see what's on that guy.
Let's show everyone on the internet.
Whoa.
Oh, let's see.
Okay, let's take a look at Drive W first, because I am supposed to have access to this one.
Should have had some files in there.
It's still refreshing, probably.
Not in the, not in the test, but just the regular one should have.
Oh yeah.
Open it
But
up in
it's
XView
yeah,
or
open
something.
it up. Hold on. Open it up in icon view. Oops. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, there we go.
All right. So very nice. And I'll see if there's something on the queue here. Well, you might need to check your security settings there. But, all
See
right.
if he'll delete that stuff.
It's a RAM disk, it just gets created. All this gets created by
Yeah.
so.
By the way, you can see printers in the browser because they're shared resources. ArcaMapper UI, it's a file sharing client. If you want to access a shared printer, there's other ways to do that, including the SMB printer port. But that is not part of ArcaMapper, so it's kind of out of band for this. I don't. Maybe someday I should make it so that it'll try to create a SMB printer port if you double click on one of these. But yeah, you're not gonna have much luck writing mounting a printer to a directory there. So yeah, and if I change to guest, let's see how much I can still see. So yeah, you have guest browsing turned off. So at least you do have some level of security. So that's why I'm not seeing anything. It's because I'm not authorized to see anything. So that's that. Let's take a look at manage connections because I want to quickly show you the save feature. So we are just right out of time, sorry, but
No pressure.
No worries.
so let's say I want to save this connection so that I can get it back easily later. Let's save, and then I got this option here. The reason all of these dialogues are kind of wonky is because I recently increased the system font size and haven't gone through and resized some of these dialogues yet. But yeah, so you got the option save as restorable connection or export to file. By save as restorable connection, basically this is just a summary of the NetDrive setup string options that are going to be saved. And then I have the option of saving the password or not. If I save the password, it will get saved in the file along with everything else. Obviously, that is not secure. It is mildly obscured, that is to say, I think the string is converted into hex, but it is not encrypted. So, if nobody else has access to your system, this is probably fine. If somebody else might get hold of your hard drive, or whatever.
Understands hex.
Yes. I typically do not save the password. So
Hex is an encryption, I mean, hey.
But does it say
it's symmetric encryption. It's keyless symmetrical encryption.
Does it
Maybe
say
Aqua,
password
go to
equals?
Aqua.
So now you can see if I go
In
into the
the-
saved
The other
connections
file,
tab,
yeah.
I've got the drive W here, and I could let's disconnect here. So now I only have drive Q attached. I'll save drive Q as well, but this time I will actually save the password. Actually, you know what? No, I won't. I will export that one just so that I can show you that. So I'll delete that save connection. So I will save drive Q, and I really need to make sure that it saves the window position on this guy. Might be something I need to implement. So I will export to file in this case, and I will save the password. So now I get the file save dialog, and I will call it q.ndc. And I will put it in my home directory, which is the default. So now, because I exported it rather than saving it as a restorable connection, it does not show up here. This is only for the restorable connections. It does not show exported connections. Now these are really just NDC files that are located in a subdirectory of home. The full location is in the help somewhere if you're really interested. You can also access the preferences dialog from here, by the way. And I will actually activate both of those. Actually, I'll activate all of them. Okay, so, oops, I will disconnect from Q just so that I can demonstrate this. So what does the restore connections on startup do? It really just puts a shadow of this guy, restore connections, into your startup folder. So if I just, again, to confirm, I say net use, there's nothing there. Oh, there's another option, command here. This also supports net who and net start. You can actually stop the ND control program with net stop. You can start it again with net start. And I think the only other command is net help, which is about what you would think it does. So anyway, so net use shows nothing. I will restore connections. One connection restored. And it didn't have to ask me for a password because I still have this guy in my credential cache, so it knows to use it. And if I now look at my, actually I'll just do it from here, and use, there we go. And I will also show you how to import that exported connection. In this case, I did not save drive Q here, but I exported it, so I can import it if I want to reattach that connection. Q.ndc, okay, there we go. It's back. So if you want to remember connections between shutdowns, basically you want to save them as restorable connections here, and then just have that restore connections on startup. And when you reboot, you will get prompted for the connections. And if we have time, if Neil doesn't mind, I'll just reboot and show you that.
If you save the password, you're saving a credential, is that right?
You're saving the well, yes, effectively. A credential is just a username plus a password, right? So the username is always saved in the file, but the password, unless you have that turned on, is not.
Okay.
Just very quickly. Still have that mounted.
Alex, well, one thing in my wish list is to learn to install the Samba server. It's not really a question on your presentation, but is it hard? Is it difficult, or?
Again, I'm the wrong guy to ask questions about the Samba
Which
server.
Samba server? The Samba server 4? You can do that from RPM.
Mm.
Okay.
You can. I believe you can also install it from the selective installer for networking program,
Okay,
which is in your installer root folder.
but I guess it's from RPM is,
That one installs 3.
That's all
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
okay, so
Oh.
RPM.
Okay.
RPM, you should find it
So
in
we
the
started up.
RPM repository.
We started up. It's trying to restore the connection, the one connection that I saved. Since I didn't save the password, I have to enter it now, and that was what was it? Warpstock 23.
23.
Restored one connection.
Oh.
And there we go. Just for some reason the monitor isn't showing the X center at the bottom there, but yeah, there it is. All right, I think that's a presentation. I'm a little over time. Sorry about that. Any
Good,
last questions, comments, short debates, as my manager in my day job likes to say?
It works really well, once you figure out all the things to check.
Yeah, it is kind of a trade-off of flexibility and capability means a little more complexity. I mean, EVFS GUI, once you get used to it, it was reasonably easy to use, but it wasn't very flexible, especially if you had multiple credentials that you wanted to use. Jeff, you got
So 2 quick questions. How much RAM you got on that machine?
on the VM, let me check.
Well, the host.
Oh,
and
the host, I think it's 16 gigs.
Okay, and to visualize what's going on behind the scenes to produce this wonderful product, how many hours did it take you to code that up to now?
Ooh, I don't know, because I don't, like, I usually do it a couple hours at a time over a period of days or weeks.
Make a
The
wild
basic,
guess.
the basic functionality probably took me, I think I got the bare bones of it working in about 2 weeks, so assume a couple days, couple hours a day. I don't know, somewhere probably between 30 and 40 hours.
Okay, so the reason I ask is, this is a really simple piece of work you do. Every month I'm supporting the building of a browser. That's an enormous project with a lot of things we probably don't need, but what's the status of the browser project and who's putting all the time on that?
That's a Roderick question.
Yeah, it's a different. That's
It's a
for a
different
different presentation.
Yeah, I'm just saying though, in terms of size, you know, this is great, but, and we know, okay, that took 40 hours, I'm thinking 4,000 hours or something.
I would not be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Not
Am I off by order of magnitude?
many orders of magnitude.
I mean, on my Windows 7 machine, I got 4 browsers because there are a lot of websites, and these are the latest things. A lot of things, they just don't work on various things. I can't log on to things, I can't
The main
download stuff.
DLL the browser uses consists of 180,000 sub-projects, and that's just the main DLL for browser engine.
Yeah.
It's bloatware.
You're 3 orders of magnitude below, probably.
That's what I'm worried about on ArcaOS.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Alex.